Good morning. It's nice that I don't have to do the shushing. My daughter's a librarian. She says I have a class in that, but I'm not really sure. I'm Margaret Drinkwine. I am your board president this year, so be kind to me. Anyway, it's my honor and privilege to welcome you here on this beautiful sunny morning. Glad to see so many of you here. It's also an honor to welcome back Reverend Kent McKusick from Ames, Iowa. For those of you who may have been here when he did his ministerial internship, there is a Sunday Plus afterwards, and you'll have a chance to visit with him. And for those of you who weren't here, you get a chance to meet him. At this time in the service, we do like to welcome our visitors and guests. If there are members who brought a visitor or met a visitor and they'd like to stand up and introduce them, we'd welcome it at this time. And if they're visitors who just prefer to get up and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, that's okay too. Who all's here? Yes, sir.
My name is Jim Fletcher. Girl Coles and I are members here the last couple of years, and we're happy to have as guests my sister Joanne Gavin and her husband Mike from Southern California.
Welcome. And over here. Oh. Welcome. Well, welcome. Anybody else? There's always kind of a glare, and I'm always afraid of missing somebody. Yes, there's another hand up there. Welcome back. We do have a visitor table out in the lobby. Please help meet at the visitor table afterwards. You can ask questions. If you've been here a few times but you still consider yourself a visitor, if you have questions, it's a good time for conversation. And they'll make sure that you get to the Sunday Plus lunch. As a visitor, your lunch is free, so please let them know that you're visiting. And while we're talking about the Sunday Plus, one of my goals for this year is to develop a little more intentional gratitude towards all the unsung heroes in the background here. Scott England today organized the Sunday Plus lunch from the Sabbatical Task Force, although I got this Tom Sawyer-esque email saying, wouldn't the choir like to get together for the summer and do Sunday Plus lunch? At any rate, Scott has done an amazing job of organizing all the volunteers, bringing his own grill in to prepare the food while we're in here enhancing our minds. So I want to make sure that I say thank you to Scott, and I think sometimes I get busy when I'm going through Sunday Plus lunch and my mind is thinking about the sermon or talking to the person next to me, and I forget, especially now that we eat in Conover, to stick my head in the kitchen and say thank you. And when we're using the dishwasher, which we're not today because of the heat, to thank the people who run the dishwasher and to see how I can make their load better, and to look at the basket of linens and to thank the people who take, I think it's really one person, who takes those linens home and washes them and brings them back so we can stay as true to our environmental precepts as possible. So I'm going to be trying to practice a little more intentional gratitude during this next year, and I hope you'll join me.
Good morning. I'm Kent McKusick, and it is so good to be back with you at All Souls in Kansas City again with James, who since the last time I was here, we got married. And it always feels like coming home to come to Kansas City and to be with you. So I appreciate you getting me started towards ministry and learning some things that have been really helpful, and I've learned a few more since then too. So this morning we open with an excerpt by a reading called "The Chalice of Our Being" by the Reverend Richard Gilbert. Each morning we hold out our chalice of being to be filled with the graces of life that abound. Air to breathe, food to eat, companions to love, beauty to behold, art to cherish, and causes to serve. We share its abundance if we have any sense. We give it back if we can, something of ourselves, some love, some beauty, some grace, some gift. Each morning, we hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, to give back.
Good morning. My name is Charlotte, and I light this chalice for the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
And now, please rise in body and spirit and join us in our first hymn, "Morning is Broken," and stay standing for the affirmation of our covenant. Please join me in affirming our covenant. Goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is our. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now we'll sing our children to their classrooms.
I'm supposed to be talking about Moore Square, which is the Metropolitan Organization for Racial and Economic Equity. What I'm talking about is what you have a sign on the front of this building, Black Lives Matter. Everyone who is a member of this church is a member of Moore Square. Now, we have different task force that meet for issues night, which includes access to health, criminal justice, education, immigration, and a workforce for infrastructure. One of the things that I was so proud of is we stopped a charter organization from taking over the public schools in Kansas City. Another possibility that we did was prevent TIF going straight to a company. We put a cap on it so money will flow to the schools and libraries. So what I'm asking is if you'll give a little bit, that'll be help, because we need it, because we're doing some work for all of us. And we're diverse because we are a part of Moore Square with many black churches. And the diversity goes all the way up to the top. The co-chair is Michael Brooks and Doug Albert, who does his synagogue here in our church. So I appreciate it, I thank you, and thank you very much.
Now please join me in our words of dedication for the offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create a just and compassionate society.
This first reading is by Dr. David Breeden. He's a Unitarian Universalist minister and also a poet and social activist. This is based on the poem by a 14th century Zen master. Years end ways, I dug and dug deeper into the earth, looking for blue heaven, choking always on piles of dust rising. Then once at midnight, I slipped and fell into the sky.
Our second reading comes from Mary Oliver. The poem is Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles in the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls you, like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
I begin this morning with a reading. Humanism, in many ways, is a response to one book, a very old book that purports to have a moral message, and this purported message has in truth reached and influenced millions. And the message is wrong, frankly pernicious, because it's causing us to live our lives wrongly, build our society wrongly, and we should be angry about this book. Maybe not at the author or even the readers. They know not what they do. But certainly anger at the book itself is appropriate. We need to fight against its message, and until that message has been defeated. And of course, you all know what book I'm talking about, right? Don't you? Humpty Dumpty. That's right, Humpty Dumpty. You know the story. You might even be able to say it with me. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and all of the king's horses and all of the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. The end. There is this Humpty Dumpty mentality that says the world, be it our personal lives or society as a whole or whatever, needs to be repaired. The things that were once perfect and round and bright and shiny like an egg until they fell and broke into a million pieces. And now it's our job to reassemble all the pieces. The only problem with this mentality is everything. Because there was never, ever at any point in our lives or human history, a perfect egg of goodness to shatter? Why would there be? For 14 billion years of random, purposeless, unguided evolution, matter floated around, formed stars that lit up and were extinguished, and those stars eventually formed the material that formed you and me, and also lizards and garbage dumps and concentration camps. Why would we expect any perfection? This reading and its metaphor of Humpty Dumpty broken perfection and the flawed belief that we must commit our whole lives to self-repair and repair the world come from Greg Epstein's book, Good Without God. There's a copy of it in your library. When he wrote this book, he was serving as the humanist chaplain at Harvard Divinity School. And in many ways, his approach to religious life and chaplaincy in a multi-religious setting is similar to the work and aspirations held by Unitarian Universalists. He works to navigate a religious path that is inclusive and to find the connections between people of many different faiths and of people of no faith. He is not anti-Christian in his work, even though he does engage in the work of the trickster by causing us to believe that the book in question that makes us angry might be the Bible. The book in question just as easily could be a sacred text from any faith tradition that encourages us to look backward to a time of perfection that we can never really be certain it was there in the first place, and try to fix wherever we are now in relationship to that old perfection that probably didn't exist, so that we can return to Eden. That said, Epstein does believe that metaphors can be fun and serve a purpose, especially if the metaphor or foundational story or myth underlying the metaphor encourages a diverse group of people to do good for the world. Doing good for the world is something to be honored. Doing good in the world can be done with God, and it can be done without God. Doing good in the world can and is being done by over 1 billion people in the world who identify as atheist, agnostic, free thinker, rationalist, skeptic, cynic, secular humanist, naturalist, spiritualist, apathetic, non-religious, or any other irreligious descriptor. Greg Epstein identifies these non-believers as believers too. Believers in humanism, which is how he identifies. And many people from these groups have felt lonely, isolated, oppressed, mistrusted, and pushed to the margins of American culture. Many, if not most, Unitarian Universalists identify in some way with some part of the humanist movement made up of people who believe in life before death. As a humanist, Epstein invites people of many faiths and of no faith to stop living in the past, to consider digging and digging into the earth of this life with the possibility that we might fall into the sky of here and now. To finally know that whoever we are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to our imagination, calls to us like the wild geese. Trying to rebuild our past into a perfect present does not work. Because by making that attempt, we will forever be looking and reaching backward instead of working from that place of imperfection where we find ourselves now. You only need to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. As if he were in conversation with Mary Oliver, Epstein continues, we cease to live in the past. We move on. We focus not on who wronged us, who screwed us, but on what we can do, what we can build, how we can grow to make our lives better, end quote. He presents this thought as what could be seen as a humanist commandment, if they existed. Outside of the Humanist Manifesto, of course. Commandments, commands, rules, these are all meant to motivate us to engage life as better people. Because if the rules are not followed, there is punishment to be had. If the rules happen to be God's rules, the quality of life and the life beyond this one could be impacted. The good will be rewarded and the wicked will be punished, the promise of heaven and hell. And he reminds us, all the world's major religions were founded on the principle that divine beings or forces can promise a level of justice in a supernatural realm that cannot be perceived in this natural one. In all of the variations and assertions concerning Judgment Day, each tradition is ultimately addressing what is good for human beings. All behaviors that are identified as good behaviors do come back to us in the end, because whatever we believe, our intentions are to make the world a better place to live, even when we disagree, especially when we struggle to understand, resist, and interrupt deeply embedded systems of oppression in our communities and in our congregations. The concept of goodness is informed by a choice to either believe and follow the wants or commands of a supernatural force or engage a secular system where needs and how those needs are met are evaluated and addressed individually and collectively. The goodness here is more complex and dynamic than a simple binary of good and bad. As a Unitarian Universalist seeker, I find tremendous value in studying the religious foundations of our faith. No longer identifying as a Christian or as a believer, I continue to learn more about myself and how to live in right relationship with people who believe and who don't believe as I do, by carefully and intentionally exploring the points of connection and departure amongst and between the religions of the world. We are always awakening to ourselves and each other, whether or not God is part of our lives. I was raised in a Christian family, and while the 10 Commandments were not glossed over, believe you me, the Golden Rule was a way of living that my parents modeled and endeavored to have my brother, sister, and I engage throughout life. And I believe that we have, even with the frailties and failures that come with being human. Unlike George Bernard Shaw, who said, "The golden rule is that there are no golden rules," My mother believed and taught that the Golden Rule was the umbrella that informed each of the commandments. That's where she started from. The idea that it is essential that we treat others as we would have them treat us appears in every religion and religious practice in one form or another throughout the ages. Epstein tells us varying religious practices and diverse theological beliefs have been built upon and allied to this common ethical basis. The point is obvious, but achingly, embarrassingly important. The very first thing we have to do in order to be a good person is learn to look inside ourselves, understand what we love and hate, and use this information when deciding how to treat others. The Golden Rule shows up in every religion, but if you have a society that lacks this principle, then you don't have a society. You have chaos. But while the Golden Rule may be simple, it's hard to follow. Religious and secular people alike fail at it all the time, and then we wonder why our lives and our countries are such a mess. And one of the reasons religion still has a seemingly irresistible pull to this scientifically and rationally advanced day is that it is one of the only forces in the world whose leaders can still give themselves permission, without irony or embarrassment, to go about spouting such an obnoxiously simple but achingly and embarrassingly important message. It is a concept that essentially has no religion. It is a concept that essentially no religion misses entirely. But not a single one of these versions of the Golden Rule requires a God. End quote. This is not an invitation to scorn or belittle faithful believers in God. Believers in faith are not the enemy. Ignorance, hatred, and fear are what we need to engage and work to eliminate without ridiculing or destroying someone else's beliefs or lack of beliefs. Working to find faith in humanity is where I want to build my faith. I want to look for, find, engage, and embrace people who seek wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, equality, forgiveness, and transcendence in themselves and others. Knowing that none of us can hold all of these qualities all or even some of the time. We never were and never will be Humpty Dumpty. And we can be good with or without God because we all have the capacity to learn and grow. And as long as we continue to grow, we increase our capacity to live into the principles of our Unitarian Universalist values. With regard to growing and living, Epstein writes, none of us will ever fully recover or be healed from the human condition. No amount of repairing the world will actually ever fix it. But we can grow tremendously in our abilities to understand and to feel and to give love and affection and empathy. We can build up those around us and we can build a better world. That's humanism in a nutshell, recognizing the difference between magic and reality, then bringing people together to help each other get on with the work of growing and building. Modern life poses new challenges that no ancient religion anticipated, and no ancient religion can possibly have any better insights into these challenges than those of a reflective, serious humanism. End quote. The question of whether or not we can be good without God is ridiculous. The answer is yes. period. The question is not about the existence of God. The question is, how can we best encourage each other and support each other in living the values that we have identified as values that contribute to a more loving, just, and sustainable world. The question is, how can we live and maintain our covenantal relationship? The question is, how can we invite each other to return to healthy covenantal relationship when we have not experienced each other as at our best? In those times, may we remember the golden rule and use it to live lives or return to a life of compassion and empathy. May we do more good work together. May we work together to build something positive in the world. May we grow and live and focus more on the good than we focus on the without God. Amen, and blessed be. Our closing hymn or song, whichever language you prefer, is Fire of Commitment. Please rise in body and or spirit as we sing together. Today's closing words are by Sherwin Wine. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you.